Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Celtic Way. I'm your host, John McGinley. I'm joined by Ryan McGinley. There's no Hamish today. He's having a little bit of a holiday. He likes his holiday days, does Hamish, and he's enjoying the Australian sun. As you saw from yesterday's video, he might be enjoying the Australian sun a little bit too much, but best wishes to him and I hope he has a great weekend. But we're here. We're here to talk about Celtic, all the big talking points ahead of tomorrow's match against Hibs. But first, Ryan, how are you? How are you this morning?
Things are good. Happy Friday to you, John. Yeah, things are pretty good at the moment. I've enjoyed the kind of detox. I think that we've all enjoyed pretty much since that game's finished. It was a big game on Tuesday. I think we all went through the ringer a little bit watching it. I think we've all enjoyed the couple of days, maybe break and rest, but now we're getting back to it. Hibs away, Easter Road, traditionally quite a tough ground for Celtic to go to, although recent trips have been more fruitful than past ones, which is good. Great pitch, great stadium. Looking forward to getting into it and talking about tomorrow's game.
What's interesting about this one is we've got Hibs and then we've got Aberdeen, and it's just like maybe about 4 or 5 months ago you'd be thinking that Aberdeen game looks much harder than the Hibs game. But I think this week, with the kind of little run of form that Hibs are on, things not going great at Aberdeen, tomorrow looks the tougher test of the two matches. But, again, another interesting point, Ryan, just to throw this at you, I don't think Hibs have lost the game since we beat them in December. I think they're on an unbeaten run. They've obviously drawn a few games. They've not won all their games, but they've put together a wee unbeaten run since they last got beat by Celtic, and I think they'll fancy it tomorrow, and that will make it a tough test for Celtic, as you say.
Yeah, they'll want to probably try and prey on the fact that Celtic have played during the week as well. I know it's 4 days between Tuesday and Saturday. Basic arithmetic will tell you that, but they'll see that as an opportunity, right? Celtic have already played. They've played later than us. Maybe this is a game that we can hit them cold and potentially get something, especially at home. And their form does suggest that they could make it a game for Celtic tomorrow. They've got good individual players that are clearly playing for their manager after I thought maybe the opposite was the case, and maybe a couple of players are down tools for David Gray. But credit to him, and I think that's a real show of confidence and a vote of confidence from his players to him, and vice versa. The fact that he's managed to turn it round, because I thought with every Hibs game that went by, we were like, is this the game that maybe David Gray after it is going to get relieved of his duties? But to be
Mm-hmm.
fair to him and to his credit, he's managed to hang on, and not even hang on, but thrive in that role. And I've got a couple of Hibs supporting mates. Hibs are a tough team to keep happy, because they want to be pushing higher than where they currently are at the moment. So the fact that they're doing pretty well, and the fact that some of my pals aren't moaning as much as well, shows that they're in a pretty good place at the moment. So credit to David Gray. Be a tough game tomorrow, but you'd still expect Celtic to come out on top as winners.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has that expectation for domestic games. It's also a weird one. I don't think Celtic have played away from home in the Premiership since the start of February. I think the last time we played away from home in the Premiership was against Motherwell, which was, I think it
Yep.
was before the transfer window shut, so which just shows you how long a February it's been. It feels like that was about 5 years ago when the transfer window was still open. Yeah, I kind of feel like that. So Celtic have to get into their groove early tomorrow. And that Motherwell game wasn't particularly easy either. So, it's always tough going away from home in the Premiership, I think. It's never easy.
Yeah, never easy at all. And you want teams to give you a good game, because I think that brings out the best version in Celtic. I wouldn't want Hibs to be sitting behind the ball. I want them to go for it and the tie. A home game. Their fans will be expectant of them to put up at least a challenge against Celtic. And if they do that, then I think in turn that suits Celtic's game. They want teams to be going forward and being on the front foot, because they can hit them. They're devastating on the counter. Look at what happened during the week against Bayern Munich. That counter attack that Celtic had, helped on by Ida, then Maeda, and then it was Kuhn that put it in past Manuel Neuer. So they like teams coming out at them. With Hibs are a unique, or one of the unique ones, in which their fans will not want them to sit back. They will not allow it whatsoever, regardless if for good or for bad. They will always expect their team to go forward, especially against Celtic and Rangers. Whenever Celtic and Rangers come to Easter Road, they're expecting that a game is going to be on, and a real challenge is going to be put up by the home team and their own players. So that should suit Celtic. It will be a tough test tomorrow. I have no doubts about that. David Gray's managed to rejuvenate his team. Not that much backing in the transfer window in January, similarly to Celtic, but with the players that he's got, he's managed to turn it around. So credit to him. But I'm expecting a tough game at the same time. They gave Bayern Munich a game on Tuesday. So I expect them on top on Saturday.
We're adding peril to the game, but Francis Leicester's popping in and putting us right. The way our team is performing at the minute, lads, I don't have any fear tomorrow. And I think that's true. You know, nobody has any fear going into the games. It's more about how Celtic are kind of managing this schedule at the moment, which kind of throws up the point of, you know, what kind of team is Rodgers going to go with tomorrow? Do you think it's going to be a more rotated side, or do you think it's going to be like the full strength side and then he brings in the rotation on Tuesday night? Because it's a quick turnaround to the Aberdeen game.
The one thing that I think of is the fact that Nicholas Kuhn limped off in that game shortly after he'd scored against Bayern Munich. And in turn, Celtic seemed to lose their outball when that happened. And I know that he flitted in and out of the game against Bayern Munich, but he's always available. He's always there for an outball when required to even just hoof the ball out the park. You know that he'll go and chase it and keep the ball if he managed to get a touch of it and a hold of it. If he's injured, then it could force Rodgers to think differently. He might play Maeda through the middle again, Jota on that. Well, actually, the way you think about that, it might be a bit of a changed team if that is the case. I'm hoping that Kuhn's fit because he'd be one of the first names on the team sheet for me, especially against Hibs away from home. I think that Celtic are so fluid at the moment. They can play Maeda through the middle, or they can play Ida through the middle. I think he'll probably go for the latter against Hibs. I think that Ida will start through the middle as that focal point. He's done well in previous visits to Easter Road. I think in particular that game that he scored that double, I know they both were penalties, but in a pressure situation last season, he managed to come up trumps. So I hope.
Just a question for you, Ryan. Are you part of the Yang gang on Twitter? Do you have hope for Yang? Is tomorrow a game we might see Yang start if Nicholas Kuhn is not fit?
Potentially, yeah. And it wouldn't surprise you given the amount of game time that Rodgers is given the player as of late. And that, for me, shows that he's doing the right things in training. I remember, I don't know who it was exactly that asked him after Dundee. It might have been one of us, either Tony or I, that asked about Yang. Yeah, it was me that asked about Yang. And he was saying that he worked so hard in training. You know, he's improving on his shooting. He was laughing at that because he'd scored a header that night against Dundee in that free each draw because he was working on his shooting so much that he scores with his head, which was a bit unlikely. But you know, that's what he's there for in this team. He is there to be relied upon, and it seems that Rodgers can rely on him. The fact that Luis Palma is away at Olympiacos, he's away at pastures new and Yang stayed, shows that he might have had more trust in Yang to do some of that running off the ball. Be a bit of a nuisance on it when possible, and be fearless when on the ball as well. He's shown that in a couple of Champions League cameos, particularly against RB Leipzig and Bayern Munich. It seems as if whenever he comes up against a German team, he wants to bring out the best version of himself. If he gets that chance tomorrow, then he's got to take it with both hands. But I think he's a pretty reliable option at this point to at least be a handful, if not necessarily contributing on the goals front.
Just to reiterate, just welcome to everyone joining us live. I know people slowly join us after 10 a.m. throughout the time that we're on air, so welcome if you're just joining us. Welcome to everyone in the chat. I'm reading your messages. It's nice to see everyone saying good morning, etc. If you've got any questions for us today, guys, this is a bit of a looser show. There's not much been going on news-wise at Celtic, so this might be a good opportunity to answer any questions anyone has, or if anyone has any talking points they want us to address. There's a lot going on in the wider Scottish football sphere, a lot of reporting about outside investment and San Francisco 49ers. I'm a Seattle Seahawks man myself, Ryan, so I'm not too sure about all that. But it's an interesting week of news in Scottish football, shall we say. But as we know, Celtic are all about internal focus, all about focusing on their own energies, their own talking points, their own motivations. And it would be just nice to have a wee reminder of that again this weekend. Wouldn't it? It'd be nice to see Celtic just to go out and show that they're really focused on delivering these opportunities at the end of the season.
Yeah, it feels as if, Celtic were involved in such a massive game in the Champions League on Tuesday, and then over the past couple of days that's been overshadowed by the fact that there's been talk of outside investment going to certain clubs, which is expected, but at the same time, Celtic should be heralded for that performance against Bayern Munich. They really took it to a good team full of elite players, and I just want the narrative to be shifted back to matters on the field Because if you look at the league table, Celtic are 13 points clear. You could extend that by this time next week. You look at some of the fixtures that are coming out as well. I believe that Rangers have got St Mirren and then Kilmarnock away from home, home then away from home. So 2 difficult games for Rangers to navigate. Difficult games for Celtic against Hibs and Aberdeen, but you wouldn't put it past them to be further ahead by this point next week, especially given the form that they're currently on. Every time you see Celtic step to the field, you expect a mature performance. All those problems of last season. I can only look back to last season, some of the games that Celtic were dropping points in against the likes of Motherwell, Hearts away. That hasn't really been happening as much recently. Out with that Dundee game, the disappointment at Ibrox, and the Aberdeen game, and Dundee United as well. Celtic have been largely consistent throughout the course of this season, and that shows in the league table. A really, really professional job has been done by Brendan Rodgers. He's clearly got under the player's skin in terms of maturity, mentality, and the way that he wants to play. And I think you're actually seeing a bit more of an uptick in form recently. That Raith Rovers game, Celtic played brilliantly. I thought against Dundee United in particular, even though it was 3-0, I thought that was one of Celtic's best performances of the season. It was a real 90-minute performance, and that was great to see. So I want to see that continuation coming from Celtic this weekend. Difficult game against Hibs, but nothing that I think that they can't deal with. I'm sure they'll go to Easter Road and do the business.
Question in here from regular contributor Hazel Finn. Good morning, Hazel. Nice to see you again. She's asking Jeffrey Schlupp or Greg Taylor against Hibs. Now that is one of the selection calls that is on the table for tomorrow. You never know with these ones. You never know what the status of the squad is after these, European exertions. It can be that, some players, don't respond well, or Schlupp putting in a really extra shift, I felt, against Bayern. So there's a question mark around that, and we'll find out more from Brendan Rodgers' press conference later today. I think if it's me, though, if both are fully fit, I'm going for Jeffrey Schlupp in this one. I want to see more of him. I thought he was excellent against Bayern, and it would be nice to see him kind of get a few games under his belt, especially if the long-term outlook on Greg Taylor is that he won't, he will be leaving Celtic. Obviously, Schlupp's undecided on whether he'll be signing up at Celtic at the end of the season, but I think everyone wants to see more of him, don't they, Ryan?
I think they want to see that combined partnership of Jeffrey Schlupp and Jota, because what we've seen against Dundee United was really, really exciting. I like the fact that this is why it's so effective that he's a so-called utility player, because he can play in a number of positions. Thankfully for Celtic, the way that they play with their fullbacks sometimes is inverted, so he can play in midfield as well as left back and understand that role. He knows when to tuck in and allow Jota to isolate himself against his marker, and that was working to great effect, especially in the first half against Dundee United. I think the key for Celtic in this second half of the season is to really get the best out of Jota and make sure that he's fighting fit, especially going into pre-season. Next season, you think of that qualifier that Celtic are going to have against a Champions League team or a Champions League hopeful. You want Jota to be fit and ready for that. Now, that's months away, but I want him to be completely ready, both mentally and physically. In order to get the best out of him just now, I think you play Jeffrey Schlupp there, because there is more chance of Jeffrey Schlupp being at the club than Taylor next season, and that's quite crazy to say, because one of them's got a permanent contract, yes, until the end of the season, and one of them's unattached, from any club at the end of the season. I know Greg Taylor's the same, but at this point in time, it's more likely that Jeffrey Schlupp signs a permanent deal than Greg Taylor, in my opinion. So I think you're better off persevering with that option. He's a Premier League veteran. He's won the Premier League, although I cannot believe that was 10 years ago that he won the Premier League with Leicester. That's absolutely incredible how time flies. Yeah, I'm enjoying what he's bringing to the squad at the moment. Something different, that physicality, that strength, and that understanding of his role, not just as a left back, but as an inverted left back too. I want to see more like you, and I would definitely start him tomorrow against Hibs.
The counterpoint to Schlupp's long-term Celtic, ambitions, as it were, is perhaps a wage issue, which is its own thing. A lot of people thinking that we might not be able to shell out on the wages that he might be looking for leaving Crystal Palace. That will take care of itself. I would also like to say, I don't have any question marks about Greg Taylor domestically at all. I think he's an excellent player in the Scottish Premiership and has shown that time and again, has been an integral part of this team winning domestic trophy after domestic trophy. So if Greg Taylor's in the team as the first choice between now and the end of the season, I've got no issue with that whatsoever. But I kind of agree with you in the sense that we do want to see more of But it's nice to see new players in the team. That's part of the novelty of supporting a football team is to see new signings. Jay Lynn's got a question for us. Not sure about this question, but they're saying, Morning Lads got a question for who's better, the J League stars we have or the English league players Rodgers signs. Now, it's a bit of both, isn't it? You want recruitment from a wide area, a wide sphere. People will say that obviously the Japanese players were signed. They came in and really took Celtic by storm and kind of changed the face of Celtic, the outlook of Celtic at the time. Ange Postecoglou was early in that kind of recruitment of bringing Japanese players to Europe to UK football. I think we'll find over the coming years now it will be more difficult to find that untapped talent because I think more and more teams will be wise to the J League now and wise to finding those bargains. And then it becomes all sorts of competitive again. It's all about Celtic finding new markets and where they want to invest their resources in terms of scouting, etc. Would I like to see more Japanese players come to Celtic? Yes, I would, simply because of the evidence of the Japanese players that have come and performed at Celtic. It's kind of undeniable. Again, it has to be the right profile of player. Rodgers will, I think, always fancy a UK-based player. I don't know how you feel about that, Ryan. It seems to be his MO. And that works for Brendan Rodgers. You can't deny that. It works for him. You get something out of those players. So you want a mix, you want a balance of all these things with recruitment, with the players that you have in your squad, the types of personality you have. So for me, it's not really one or the other. Why not a bit of both? Would you agree, Ryan?
Yeah, all about if the best possible player is available in Japan, like Kyogo was at that time, then by all means go and sign him. But I think the days of so-called project players or cheap-end project players are over because I would say some of Celtic's more expensive players are still projects at the end of the day. I look at Adam Ida, despite being, 23, 24, I still think he's a long-term project for Brendan Rodgers. He likes moulding players into his own shape and his own image of what he sees as a striker. Paulo Bernardo, even though these guys are projects, they're more expensive projects and they've got that experience of playing at a high level. I believe that Paulo Bernardo played for, was it Vitória Guimarães before joining Celtic? So he had that experience of playing in the Portuguese league, which is evidently a better league than the Scottish league. You get Ida, who has Premier League experience. You've got Austin Trusty, who's got Premier League experience. You've got Arne Engels, that's got Bundesliga experience. I think that those are just advantages. If you've got that maturity of playing in a top 5 league or a top 6, top 7 league, depending on where you place Portugal in the landscape of global football, and if you've got that experience, then it's going to obviously help your chances in playing in a Brendan Rodgers team. Rodgers likes intelligent players, and that's not to say that intelligent players don't exist elsewhere. It's just these players are more advanced in terms of their tactical understanding. Arne Engels, yes, he's had ups and downs, but for the most part, he's impressed when he's on the football pitch, and that's because he's had that Bundesliga experience. Austin Trusty did not have the greatest Premier League experience last season, but it's clearly helped him because he understands back to the wall defending. I think some of his best performances this season have been against the likes of Bayern Munich, Atalanta, RB Leipzig, etc. when he has to defend, when he's concentrating on defending. And Adam Ida, he's got that experience playing in the Premier League. He scored goals at the highest level. So I think that puts these players in perfect stead for playing on a Rodgers team. But if these players are available in the J League, if they're the best player, such as Kyogo, Hatate was making waves before he made the move to Celtic. Daiz Maeda was the top scorer before he came to Celtic. If these players are available, then absolutely brilliant. But I think that, and I totally agree with your point, I think the watering hole's a lot busier now with teams all over Europe now looking to shop in that market. They've understood that Celtic have exploited that gap in the market, and now they've kind of shored it up and by putting their own scouts there. So if they can get these players, brilliant, but I think it'll be more tough competition in order to get that. And you don't have that in with Ange Postecoglou anymore. That was also a factor, the fact that they'd maybe dealt with him before, and the fact that he'd been in the Japanese sort of stratosphere, the fact that he isn't there anymore makes it difficult to get back into that market.
Well, I mean, Maeda was Ange's little gem, wasn't he? And I think he knew exactly what he was getting. The person least surprised about Maeda's impact at Celtic was Ange Postecoglou. He knew exactly what he was going to offer. He knew exactly his attributes. He knew his unique attributes. I think in the early interviews when he was talking about when he first signed, he really talked up his pressing and running and that ability to go again and again, which is a mentality as much as a physical thing. So obviously he's very physically gifted as well, but it's a mentality in my head that is also so impressive. I think just on your point, recruitment is going to be very interesting this summer. Just for good or ill, good or bad, I think it's going to be a very interesting summer for Celtic. Paul Tisdale's going to have been in the job for a longer time. He did consultancy work for Celtic last summer, unofficially from October. He's got his feet under the table. I think Arne Engels' point is crucial, because I think the way Arne Engels is developing now, and again what we saw from him against Bayern on Tuesday night, if you get 2 or 3 more Arne Engels, that's really what you want. Obviously not that position, but that kind of profile, that young internationalist. But as we keep saying, it is so competitive for those players. Like, the Arne Engels deal went on all summer because I think he wanted to be a main man at Celtic. He wanted that kind of assurance that he was going to be a regular starter for Celtic, and that depended on Matt O'Reilly leaving for Brighton. So there's all sorts of moving parts, but I do think it's going to be a very interesting summer. Just in terms of the team tomorrow then, let's run through what we think it's going to be. Obviously Schmeichel in goal, Alistair Johnston, maybe Ralston. Ralston's been not bad of late, I would suggest. Do you think he could come in? I'll tell you where I am on it, Ryan, just before I let you come in. I think Rodgers is going to go as strong as possible tomorrow. Okay. I think the rotation in the team might come on Tuesday night. I think just that little extra day. I know there was lots of exertion during the week, but I don't think there's going to be too many changes to the team tomorrow. So, but saying that, Alistair Johnston, again, one of those players who just put in everything on Tuesday night. So combative, so physical, and it wouldn't be a surprise for me at all to see Ralston on the right side of that defence. But then I think Carter Vickers and Trusty will be in the centre, and I think maybe Schlipp will start again tomorrow. Would that be your back four, do you think?
I would hope that Alistair Johnston starts now. Now that the European exploits are over, I want Celtic, for most of their games anyway, I know rotation will be a required element from now until the end of the season in terms of keeping the team fresh. But a game against Hibs away from home requires a strong team in order to get the 3 points, in my opinion. Just in history, I've watched Celtic for a number of years. Easter Road hasn't been a happy hunting ground for a lot of years for Celtic. It's just recently, they made. I was at the game at Easter Road at the beginning of the season, and those first 20-25 minutes, they were absolutely incredible. It was a really, really good performance. They kind of fell away in the second half, but it was still a comfortable 2-0 win. For me, Alistair Johnston starts, and if you're going by form in the form book, then you put Jeffrey Schlupp in there. He'll be desperate for game time. He's been in and out of the Crystal Palace team all season, hardly getting game time. Be more Tyreek Mitchell that's probably playing in that left back role for Crystal Palace. So the fact that he's got renewed game time and a renewed sense of optimism with his football, I would play him because I like what he brings to the team. I would go as strong as possible, and he's in my strongest 11 at this moment in time.
Then it'll be Callum McGregor, Arne Engels in the middle of the park, just given Paulo Bernardo is out injured at the moment, unfortunately. But then who are you going for, Ray Otati or Luke McCowan? I'm going for Luke McCowan tomorrow. I don't know about you, Ryan. Yeah.
I think we get the same team, but I love what he brings domestically. He just understands, and I talk about it every time that I speak about Luke McCowan. He understands the geography of Scottish football, and that's such a plus, and it's probably why he's at Celtic at the moment, is because he understands what is required in these domestic games. So he's also coming up against a team that know all about him and know that they wanted him all summer. It was Celtic. They were like, right, we're going to just take this player off your hands. I think he probably, if Celtic hadn't have made that intervention, I think he probably would have made that late move to Hibs. Something would have been sorted out. But once the connection between Celtic and Dundee was made, that initial contact, he was only going one place. And with Jackie McNamara as his agent as well, I think he was sending him one place, and that was Celtic. I just love the Luke McCowan story, and you're going to see that in the next couple of days whenever my article makes its debut on the website. But it's a great story.
I just want to touch on that. Ryan's been talking to a lot of people who were involved in the kind of development of Luke McCowan as former coaches, as former managers, that have been preparing kind of like a big article on Luke McCowan's journey from Ayr United to Dundee to Celtic, because it's quite rare these days for a player to make that journey, and so we just thought it was an interesting story. So we've really dug into that, and we've got that going out over the weekend. I think we'll be publishing that on Sunday. So hopefully he has a good game against Hibs, so that we can, there's more interest around that. But that's going to be a really interesting read for everyone, and because he made a lot of sacrifices. He put everything into building his football career, didn't he, Ryan? Without giving the whole story away, just that's the feeling. A lot of sacrifice, a lot of hard work for McCowan to get to where he is.
There's a lot of the heart of football it's been ripped out of football in recent times. The intervention of VAR, finances, etc. It's not often that you hear about fairy tale stories anymore, but Luke McCown's is the closest to a fairy tale story that I think you're going to hear in terms of going from a team in the Championship in League One to going to the Premiership and playing in the Champions League. It's a great story, and I've really enjoyed uncovering it for the Celtic way. I'm looking forward to everybody else reading about it, because I think if you didn't now, if you're maybe one of the two or three people that don't rate Luke McCown at this point, because I feel like everybody absolutely adores him when they watch him for Celtic, what he brings both on and off the park. If you didn't like him then I think you'll like him after this video in terms of the sacrifices that he's made to become a professional footballer at his level, at the level that he's at currently. Got three big sources that all worked with Luke McCown over his development of his young career to where he is just now, and it's a really good story, and I'm looking forward to everybody reading it.
We're on the Luke McCowan train then. Just on
Absolutely.
the front three. I'm going to be an optimist and hope that Kuhn was just coming off a wee bit of cramp, against Bayern, and there's no lingering issue there. So I have Kuhn on the right, full strength. I think it's hard at the moment because
Yeah.
it's a good game for Adamita to come into. So it's a little bit tricky. But if you're talking full strength, then I think I want to see more of Jota, Maeda, and Kuhn. And then obviously there might be fitness or kind of fatigue issues that Rodgers will be dealing with. I wonder if he'll give a steer of that, in his press conference. But is that maybe your strongest front three at the moment? If everyone's fully fit, Kuhn, Maeda, and Jota.
This is the conundrum that I face, because I believe that Adamida will play tomorrow from the start through the middle as a focal point up front. If you're looking to counter, especially Rocky Bashiri, who's quite an imposing presence at the back. Got a mistake in him, evidently. We've seen that over the course of the season, but he is an imposing presence. It's all about if you fight fire with fire or fire with water with regard to Maeda or Ida. For me, I think Adamida will start up front. I just think the fact that he didn't play from the start against Bayern Munich will mean that you get that rotation. Similarly to Luke McCown, didn't play at all against Bayern Munich, which then makes me think that he'll play against Hibs, be fully fresh, bring that dynamism into midfield. That maybe some tired legs still in there from the exploits on Tuesday night. I want to see more of Jota, but I also want to see Maeda as well. So I'm in this weird conundrum between the two players. I just wonder if maybe they wouldn't rest Maeda, but Rodgers wouldn't rest Maeda. He's one of the first names on the team sheet. So if that's the case, then Jota will be on the bench. But then Jota can maybe play on the right if Kuhn's not fit. So this is the good thing. They've got options in this area.
Yeah, what I'm hearing, Ryan, is that
Jota's been such a great...
Yeah. What I'm hearing for you is that Celtic have options at the moment, and
Absolutely.
I think although the squad size has been reduced overall, I think there's more than enough in the tank, barring any injury crisis, which obviously, touch wood, we don't want to see. But I think the group that Brendan Rodgers has is focused, it's kind of tuned. Everyone is a possible starter. Everyone can come off the bench and try and make a impact, and I think that's going to be good for Celtic in these closing months. I think, I do agree we could have added another striker in the winter window. It didn't happen. I think Rodgers is going to be quite happy with the kind of the strict unit, the attuned unit going for this 2 trophies at the end of the season. And I think it all starts again. I think there is, you talked at the start of this show, that it's been nice to kind of have that come down from the Champions League experience. It does feel like everyone's kind of refocusing a bit, and I think the players will be the same. They'll have that same mindset. Rodgers certainly will, and I'm looking forward to seeing Celtic just really go for it, starting tomorrow. Really go for it. Just get this league over the line as quickly as possible, and just then you make it all about the cup, don't you? You make it all about the cup games coming up. Obviously, we've got Hibs in the cup as well, so that's another wee narrative going into tomorrow.
I'm quite delighted that Celtic have got Hibs in the cup. I'm happy that they've got Hibs over the likes of maybe a Queen's Park or St Johnstone or a Livingston, because it means that they'll have to up their game. It'll be a proper cup tie at Celtic Park. Delighted with the fact that it's a 3 p.m. kickoff rather than the late kickoff that was getting mooted for the past couple of weeks. The fact that it's a traditional kickoff is pretty good, and I think that'll really add to the atmosphere of the game. The big crowd that will be brought by Hibs, I'm sure that they'll bring a big away allocation. I think it's going to be a great game between between both sides. And Celtic or Hibs will bring out the best in Celtic. They're one of those teams that, regardless of their form, you always expect a bit of a clash between the two sides. And I think that will suit Celtic. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it all transpires tomorrow. Bit of a dress rehearsal ahead of the quarter final against Hibs in the Scottish Cup. But Celtic have got a job to do. They're 10 games, 10, 11 games away for the treble in all competitions. That's got to be their focus, getting to the treble or getting the double finished as soon as possible. Then they can put all their attention, all their eggs in the basket of the Scottish Cup and getting that third treble, that third trophy in a treble season.
Listen, guys, I said there wasn't much to talk about the game today. We're already over half an hour. I could probably go for another half an hour, to be honest with you.
Me
That's
too.
what happens when I host the show. Talk too much. We've got one final wee question from Dan Tinney here. What about Narodsky? When is he going to get another chance? My answer to that, Dan, is I don't think he's going to. Unfortunately, unless again there's injuries. I think it's clear that Liam Scales is ahead of him. I think it's also clear that Dane Murray's ahead of him in the eyes of Brendan Rodgers at least. And he likes Dane Murray. He likes the attributes that Dane Murray has. I think he's obviously talked about, with Dane Murray maybe having more concentration in matches and maybe, tuning up that kind of mentality to be a Celtic player, to have that bravado, to have that warrior spirit in the heart of that Celtic defence. But I think he likes the kind of physical attributes of Dane Murray, and I think he would get any minutes ahead of Narodsky at this point. Wouldn't you say, Ryan? I think Narodsky's probably heading for the exit door this summer.
Completely agree, and you've seen the food chain of the Celtic centre backs with the way the squad lined up against Rafe Rovers with rotation. Nawrowski was still only on the bench. In some ways I was quite surprised to even see him on the bench. You didn't really see that domestically. It's usually Scales, Welsh in the first half of the season. Now it's Dane Murray that gets on the bench. For me, it's quite weird to call Dane Murray. What age is he? 21 years old now. I think he's 21 years old. Do you call him a late bloomer because of his injury history? Because he played as a 16-year-old against Michelin, but he's had such a torrid time with injuries. I think he's had 2 ACL injuries, which can be so debilitating to a young player, especially in his formative years. Similar happened to Kieran Tierney, to be fair. He did break his leg when he was younger, but he came back and was a better player for it. In some alternate Celtic universe, Dane Murray might have already made 100 appearances for Celtic under both Ange Postecoglou and then Brendan Rodgers, because Ange Postecoglou trusted him in a big game against Michelin. Yes, alongside Nir Bitton, or he came on for Nir Bitton when he gets sent off in that game. He's a player that you think has really. He's impressed whenever I've seen him. Yes, he made that mistake against Aston Villa, but it's a different quality of player altogether that are going to punish you. Players are going to get punished at that level. I was impressed with what I seen against Rafe Rovers. He got the adulation of the crowd when he came off the pitch for Nawrowski, and I want to see more of him, just not in big games. I want to see that Trusty and CCV partnership continue from now till the end of the season. And unless an injury happens to either of them, I don't want that partnership broken from now until the end of the season. Or if there's games in which the league is already over and you're playing towards the cup final if you're there.
And I think that's why I'm a bit hesitant about Dane Murray in general. Not that I don't like the look of him, and I don't, obviously believe what Rodgers says about him. He's obviously a fan of him. But obviously there's people ahead of him in the pecking order. It's going to be difficult for him to get that kind of consistent minutes. It's not like he's a midfielder where he could come in for half an hour at a time here and there. It doesn't really work like that in the terms of the central defence. What I would say though is I do like the way kind of Celtic have handled Dane Murray this season. I think it's been quite calculated in what they've done, in the sense of they wanted to test him out after his injury, sent him to Queen's Park where he played consistently and kind of showed that he had the robustness. He wasn't going to relapse into another injury. He could play kind of on a week-to-week basis, and now he's come back and kind of had a chance in training, and Rodgers likes what he sees. So I like that. I like having young players kind of in the pocket if we need them. There's obviously a long way to go with Dane Murray, and I'm hesitant to tip him to be a Celtic regular or a Celtic stalwart of the future, but it is nice that Rodgers does rate one of the young players that have come through, and that we're kind of giving them that kind of focused pathway almost to being involved in the first team squad, and that's what we want to see more of from more of the youth players coming through Lennox Town. Yeah, so Ryan, thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us, everyone in the chat. It's been good to talk this morning. I like hosting this. I don't host it too often, but I like doing it when I do it because I like interacting with everyone who is our regulars and who asks us questions and who has comments. Sometimes a bit wild in the chat, Ryan, but we like that, don't we? We like a bit of busyness in the morning.
it's the Wild West at times in that chat room, but we wouldn't have it any other way. It's always eventful, always about 5 or 6 chats going on at the one time. But we would rather that than it being completely empty and having nobody in it. So it shows that people are tuning in every day for the show. We really do appreciate each and every one of you.
Listen, I just want to say as well, we've had quite a lot on the website over the last while, some good stuff for subscribers. So if you want to subscribe to the Celtic Way, it's currently just £1 for 6 months. We had a really good article from our analyst Stuart Ross yesterday on Kasper Schmeichel and just how good he has been in the Champions League. Everyone knows Kasper Schmeichel's been good in the Champions League this year, but you kind of look past all the flashy moments, the big saves, and it showed that Kasper Schmeichel's arguably even be a bit better than anyone thought in terms of comparisons to elite goalkeepers around Europe in the Champions League. So that was a very interesting read. We've got lots more. Obviously, Tony was in Munich all week. Lots of stuff coming out of that. Where there's press conferences today. Tony's at Hibs tomorrow. We've got loads of stuff going on. We've got this big Luke McCowan article we're doing. So there's a lot going on, not just in terms of the news, which is mostly free for everyone to read, but also in terms of our subscription articles and the kind of longer form stuff we're putting out. But your subscriptions really matter to that. So if you're a fan of what we do in the channel, or you're a fan of what we do on the website, £1 for 6 months will go a long way to helping us to do this a lot more. But yeah, Ryan, any final thoughts just before we head off?
Looking forward to getting back to domestic action tomorrow, away game on Saturday, and then a home game on Tuesday against Hibs and Aberdeen. All the focus must now be on getting this league all wrapped up as soon as possible, and then they can focus on potentially getting another treble. But all is good in the land of Celtic as we look forward to more domestic games.
Okay, thanks everyone. We'll say goodbye. Thanks to everyone in the chat. Thanks to everyone in the comments below, commenting later. Well, like you all, we'll see you again. We'll be back tomorrow. I'm on with Tony, who's at the game. We'll be chatting all about Celtic again, and hopefully a good day for Celtic on Saturday. Goodbye.
Cheers, guys.